Hi everybody, welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. You guys, I love doing this channel. I love this opportunity to just study the gospel, the scriptures, the words of the prophets, and also things like this. This is a talk by Truman G. Madsen. He was a professor at BYU. He was also director of the BYU Jerusalem Center. He was an author, and he taught in the institute. And he shares some very valuable stuff in this talk called A House of Glory. So this is a BYU devotional, March 5th, 1972. I already recorded a video about this talk. He shared some fascinating stuff that I did not know about President Wilford Woodruff having had a vision before he became president of the church where he was going to dedicate the Salt Lake Temple. He already knew that ahead of time, and there's an account here of the Salt Lake Temple glowing. So I already recorded a video about that. If you missed it, please go back and watch it. I hope that you go back. If you miss any of my videos, go back and I'm not just saying this because I'm trying to have a successful YouTube channel. Go back and watch as many as you can because there are so many things that we cover, and I do my best to try and portray that in the titles and the thumbnails, but sometimes I can't do it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to watch the videos. You could just like look at the thumbnail and get all the information. It doesn't work like that. So if you missed any, go back, and even if it looks like it's boring, it's usually just because I don't know how to make it exciting to you. But I assure you, there's so many things that we've covered already on this channel. Okay, so I'm going to start right here. There's kind of like two things that we're going to cover. This is the first one. Okay, what is glory? Well, it is many things in the scriptures. One strand of meaning is often neglected. If we can trust one Hebrew student, the Hebrew word equivalent to glory, kabod, refers in some of its strands to physical presence. Just as a person says in common parlance today, he was there in all his glory, so the Old Testament often uses this word for God. In the psalm that refers to the glory, Psalm 8, there are two changes that are crucial. King James reads, "Thou hast made man a little lower than the angels, and hast crowned him with glory and honor." Probably what that verse said originally was, "Thou hast made man a little lower than the gods, and hath crowned him with a physical body and with honor." This is the truth. The body is a step up in the scales of progression, not a step down. God is God because he is gloriously embodied, and were he not so embodied, he would be less than God. The privilege of the house of God is in effect to have our physical beings brought into harmony with our spiritual personalities. Okay, now here's the part right here. You can tell by all the highlights. "And I have read, but cannot quote perfectly, only paraphrase," which I really wish he had got the source for this so I could go to the primary source. If you guys know where to find this, what I'm about to read, please, please, please send it to me. I searched in the teachings of Lorenzo Snow. I searched in the Journal of Discourses. I could not find this, so I'll believe him though. Okay, so the testimony of President Lorenzo Snow to the effect that this is the only way, I repeat, the only way that the knowledge locked in our spirit can become part of this flesh. Okay? The knowledge locked in our spirit can become part of this flesh. Thus occurs the inseparable union, that blending which makes possible celestial resurrection. It is, as if I may mix the figure, we are given in the house of God a patriarchal blessing to every organ and attribute and power of our being. A blessing that is to be fulfilled in this world and the next. Keys and insights that can enable us to live a godly life in a very worldly world, protected, yes, even insulated from the poisons and distortions that are everywhere. Now, I'm going to confess something to you guys. It's been a long time since I've done initiatories. I can't even remember how long it's been since I've done it. That's the next thing I'm going to do. Next time we go to the Kansas City, Missouri temple, I'm going to do initiatories. I feel like initiatories have been coming up on my channel recently. And I think what he's referring to here is initiatories. Okay. And it's such an interesting way to say it. A patriarchal blessing to every organ and attribute and power of our being. And also the knowledge locked in our spirit becoming part of this flesh. So it's almost as though, and I don't know that I can fully expound this, but I really think that it's not just symbolic. I think that it's an actual thing that takes place when you get your initiatories and go through the endowment. I think there are actually physical things that take place with your body. And I think it's hard to detect. I'm not aware of any studies that have been done to look at people before they go and get their initiatories and endowment or afterwards. So, but I wouldn't be surprised if you were to do such a study, you would find people that have more power in various ways. Let's look at something that I covered recently on the channel. Okay, we're going to my spreadsheet called quotes A through Z. This is currently row 160 for endowment, power of. And hopefully we all know the initiatories are part of the endowment. It's like the first part of the endowment. So I just have it all right here for right now on this row. That may change in the future. Okay, so recently there was this article from Deseret News dated April 11th, 2025 by Tad Walsh. Religion, research among 5 goals the first presidency set for BYU's new School of Medicine. Okay, listen to this. And I think that this is referring to initiatories. The inaugural dean shared several experiences of ways he felt God was helping his team over the past 6 months. One related to the way medical schools are compressing what was once the first 2 years of lectures to somewhere between 1 and 18 months. What would BYU do? The working group addressing the issue struggled to reach a consensus. Ott said he attended the temple the next day and was struck by the increased capacity and endurance promised to those who make one of the covenants there. He also recalled a Latter-day Saint scripture that states, "Doubt not, fear not." Quote, "If I knew our students would honor their covenants, that they would be able to do a 12 to 15 month curriculum," he said. Another committee member had the same experience, and the committee moved ahead. So, I don't know. I'm gonna have to go through probably a few more times to know specifically what he's referring to, but whatever the case, endurance, additional power, patriarchal blessing to every organ, attribute, and power of our being. And, if we go back here, I'm not going to read these, but I have these other quotes talking about how there really is power that comes from getting your endowment. It's been said a number of times that the pioneers, they needed to go through the Nauvoo Temple and receive their endowments to be prepared for the trek to Utah. It'd be interesting to see if you could somehow do some kind of experiment, and see what would it have been like had they not received their endowments. Maybe the trek wouldn't have been successful, or maybe it would have been severely diminished. Many more people dying or having accidents along the way. I don't know. But, maybe we should all look at our own lives and, for those of us that have gone through the temple and examine areas where maybe we did have additional power with what we've done. If appropriate and if it's not too personal, share it in the comments below. Do you feel like you've had additional endurance, strength, insight, um, something like that that's helped you accomplish something? Uh, honestly, I tend to think that maybe it kind of helps me with what I do. I feel like it could help me here doing this YouTube channel. I'm sure it does with all the other LDS content creators, because doing a YouTube channel, it really takes it out of you. I'll tell you what, there are so many spiritual, psychological, emotional stressors that come with doing this. And then with my channel specifically, there are people that, in usually in a mocking way, have asked me, "Oh, do you have ADHD, OCD? I think you're OCD with all the stuff that you're doing." And I don't think that's the case. I've never been diagnosed with anything other than anxiety. Um, but in some of it, I attribute to having been in the army, because the army really helped me know where my limits are. Because with a lot of us, we prefer to live a comfortable life, and we shy away from getting to the limit, and so we mistakenly believe that we're not capable of doing certain things because um, we're just like so used to comfort. So the army showed me that you really are so much more capable than what you think. But on top of that, because I think some of it comes from the army, but I think some of the rest of it for me comes from receiving my endowment. Um, so I find that really interesting. Before we move on, I just want to, just because I think it's so interesting, one more time. The only way that knowledge locked in our spirit can become part of this flesh. And I wonder what all that knowledge would entail. I wonder if some of it would be becoming more in tune with the things that you prepared to do in the pre-mortal life. Maybe it unlocks some of that. And now you have a better sense of what your purpose is in this life. And then again, a patriarchal blessing to every organ and attribute and power of our being, not just for the next world, but also in this world. Okay, now here's the second part. Well, not quite yet. Okay, that is the temple, the glory of God, His ultimate perfection, in His house, duplicated in us, provided we go there in a susceptible attitude. Okay, here's the second part. This section is called About Preparation. Let me turn to a few remarks about how, sorry. Let me turn to a few remarks about the how of susceptibility. Listening once in Los Angeles to the plea of President McKay, stake president after stake president pledged contributions to make possible the building of the Los Angeles Temple. They committed. And then he arose and delivered a masterful discourse, maybe the greatest I have ever heard on the subject of temples. In shorthand, I jotted down one paragraph, which I'm going to quote, but before I do so, let me give this explanation. He told of a girl I found later who was his niece and therefore felt confident in confiding in him. Earlier that year, she had been initiated in a sorority. And not long thereafter, she had gone through the temple, quote unquote, as we say. I wish that verb could be improved, going through the temple. I wish we could somehow speak of the temple going through us. I feel like somebody said that recently. I feel like I actually covered that on the channel. Someone said that recently. The temple going through us. Okay, continuing. I wish that my children had not been confused. It's my fault that they were when my wife and I used to say to them we were going to do ceilings, they thought we would take a step ladder and a bucket. It's a kind of Mormon activism to talk about temple work, quote unquote. There's a sense, of course, in which it is work, but too rarely we do speak of temple. But too rarely do we speak of temple worship, which can send us back to our work changed. A man of God in the temple said in my hearing, I wonder if the dead are blessed as much as the living by the temple. I am impatient with people who are impatient in the temple. I am distressed when someone sits behind me with a stopwatch and keeps saying, they're 5 minutes behind. Move, move, move. Gosh. Let me add some of my own commentary here. Yeah, it makes me impatient too. It's so sad to me when people can't help but to do things like this, be irreverent, talk. A couple of the worst things I've ever experienced in the temple is like after going to the ordinance room, you're sitting waiting for the session to start, and you hear a couple guys behind you or in front of you just talking about everyday things, as though they're like still outside the temple, talking about going on a trip or work or just stuff that's not supposed to be part of the temple experience. And I don't know, everybody has their own situation, and there's psychological factors. But I wish that every single time I went to the temple, it could just be focused on the temple. And usually it is. And usually it is. It's quiet, reverent, spiritual. But sometimes you get those things that creep in, and it's just like, hey, are you supposed to be here today? Like, are you ready to be here? Okay. Moving on. Isn't there one place we can go and leave our watch in the locker and rejoice if there are delays and embrace what is there for us? Well, on the occasion in Los Angeles, President McKay stopped everyone by saying, this young lady came to me. She had both experiences. So the sorority initiation and then the temple. But she said she had been far more impressed with her sorority. We gasped, as you did. President McKay was a master of the pause. He let that wait a minute and then said, brothers and sisters, she was disappointed in the temple. Brothers and sisters, I was disappointed in the temple. But then he finished his sentence, and so were you. Then no one gasped. He had us. Why were we? He asked. And then he named some of the things. We were not prepared. How could we be? We had been... I forgot to highlight that. That's like one of the... I have like these different colors to show the different reasons why we were, quote unquote, disappointed with the temple. Like, I guess, the first time. Okay, we were not prepared. How could we be? We had stereotypes in our minds, faulty expectations. We were unable to distinguish the symbol from the symbolized. We were not worthy enough. We were too inclined quickly to respond negatively, critically. And we had not yet seasoned. Okay, we were not yet seasoned spiritually, I think is what it should say. Those are my words, but they cover about what he said. I will give you the quotation verbatim. He said, brothers and sisters, I believe there are few, end quote. And I remind you, this was a man at that time, 80 years of age, who had been in the temple every week for some 50 years, which gave him, I thought, some right to speak. And then continuing with the quote, I believe there are few, even temple workers, who comprehend the full meaning and power of the temple endowment. Seen for what it is It is the step-by-step ascent, end quote. I pause to remind you of both strands of meaning: assent, agreement, consent, covenant, but also ascent as in to rise. So step-by-step agreement, step-by-step consent, step-by-step covenant. Okay. And then he continues with President David O. McKay's quote: "It is a step-by-step ascent into the eternal presence. If our young people could but glimpse it, it would be the most powerful spiritual motivation of their lives." Okay, before I finish this last part, I have a question for you. I don't know if this is the quote that I had heard one time growing up, where it was something like this. Although I seem to remember it being President Ezra Taft Benson saying, "I am only now beginning to realize what the endowment is all about." If you know what I'm talking about, could you send that to me? Or is it this, what I'm reading right now? If you know, please send it to me. I'd appreciate it. But anyway, yeah, this is something to think about. President David O. McKay, who had been to the temple every week for 50 years, said that he thinks that there are few, even temple workers, who comprehend the full meaning and power of the temple endowment. And earlier, Truman G. Madsen was talking about not being able to distinguish the symbol from the symbolized, not being worthy enough, having stereotypes in our minds and preconceptions and things like that, and not being spiritually seasoned enough. So that's something to think about. Okay, to finish, when he said that, I felt it. I had myself been a critic, had made up my mind that some things were trivial, offensive, but that day the Lord touched me, and I decided I would not speak again against the house of the Lord. I would not jest. I would not assume I knew better than the prophets. I wish there was more of that attitude today. I would listen. I would repent. I would hope that someday I could testify as did that noble man. In time, there was far more open to me than I had ever dreamed. So anyway, that's probably all that I'm going to cover from this talk, but this was a really, really good talk. It basically made up 2 videos. The first one about the dedication of the Salt Lake Temple, President Wilford Woodruff's vision, and the glow around the Salt Lake Temple. And then this just interesting stuff here about what happens when you go to the temple. So I'll put a link for this in the description box below, just like I do for every video. But that's going to be all for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.